Right, continuing here with the second New Deal, okay? It's way more liberal. He saves the American economy. Capitalism was saved in 8 days. That's one of the quotes from FDR's advisors. And he's going to take it down a way more liberal path now. Now it becomes all about social justice, right? Eleanor Roosevelt is at the heart of this. We hear about social justice when we hear about the progressives. So this is really, it's liberal, but it's rooted in this progressivism of the late 1890s. He passes things like, so wow, what does this look like? He passes things like the Wagner Act, which allowed unions to collectively bargain and did not make that illegal. He passes Social Security. These are direct payments to America. He passes the National Labor Relations Board. This is very pro-union. He passes the Fair Labor Standards Act, which gives people things like maternity leave, and it protects workers' rights, and it protects them in a labor union. Blacks and women are left behind to an extent. For example, he doesn't make federal lynching a crime. All right, he doesn't actually make it a federal crime because he couldn't lose. The part of the reason why blacks were left behind with the second New Deal is because he couldn't lose the Southern segregationists. They're also known as Dixiecrats. All right, these are Democrats in the South. He couldn't lose them. If he lost their support, he would lose his coalition in Congress. The Democratic Party slowly breaking apart. A lot of this in the second New Deal, the second part of the New Deal was blocked by the Supreme Court, so it got significant pushback. In fact, I think this was an SAQ back in March where it shows the New Deal was important and made change, but it didn't fundamentally change the United States. It expanded the role of government, but it wasn't a fundamental revolution because a lot of it was even blocked by the Supreme Court itself. All right, then we're going to get into World War II here. Again, going a little bit quicker. Let's wrap up World War II very simply here. 1939 to 1945. 1939, September 1st, Hitler invades Poland. That's really kicks off World War II. However, the foundation for World War II had been there since 32 when Hitler gets into office. All right, things with World War II here. You'll notice there are no particular battles. There are no Battle of Bulge and all that stuff. That's important. That's great. Read them on your own. You might get a couple of MCQs on them. But the biggest thing with World War II, if you're going to get hit anywhere with World War II, it's going to be processes and developments, results of it, consequences of it. As a result of this, what happened in society? Obviously, now it shifts to a Hitler versus Stalin. Hitler will invade the Soviet Union. Stalin will then become his enemy. This is really important because now Hitler's got two fronts open, right? He's got an Eastern and a Western front. When he was Stalin's friend, he only had a Western front to worry about with the Allies, but now he's got an Eastern front. And actually, the Soviets are going to get into Berlin before we are, right? The biggest thing with World War II is this real big expansion of women's rights in the workforce. This is very Rosie the Riveter, right? They're already voting, but this is the beginning of really pushing women and keeping women permanently in the workforce. Well, Mr. Sprang, aren't women going to go back to domesticity in the 1950s? Yes, but not all women. Many, many women will go back into domesticity in the 1950s. However, why this is so important in World War II is because this really opened the door and it expanded female opportunities in the workforce. We started to see this with things like stenographers in the first industrial revolution, but now it becomes a permanent expansion of women in the workforce due to World War II. There's a much larger role of government. The government during World War II is going to intern Japanese people. It's going to produce a lot in the economy. It's going to regulate the economy, but it really is an active government in all aspects. It's active in people's lives. It's active in the economy. It's active in defense mobilization. Now, defense mobilization is so important because it included women, right? It brought women into it, things like Rosie the Riveter. However, defense mobilization is also so important because it's defense mobilization that ends that ends the Great Depression. It is not the New Deal. After, up here with the New Deal, after FDR does all this with the New Deal, unemployment is still 15%. So it doesn't really, you see that chart, it doesn't crash. Unemployment doesn't crash and you get people working with defense mobilization. This is what ends the Great Depression. Now the United States is seen as a superpower, and there's only one more left. It's now the US versus the USSR. That is the Soviet Republic. All right, communism. It's capitalism versus communism. And this is because all of number 5 is US as a superpower because France and England and Germany lost all of their colonies and the colonial shifts were changing. India fell, right? That used to be a British colony. Big thing here too, number 6, big changes in labor and migration. Who is being brought into the workforce? Why they're being brought into the workforce, such as women and blacks and migratory patterns. We're now going to see a shift southward with the Sun Belt, and millions of black people continue to move north during the Second World War for jobs. It's almost, you could say, a second Great Migration. All right, number 7, really important here, is during the Second World War, what else was born is the foundation for the civil rights era, okay? As seen through things like Executive Order 8802, as seen through the Double V campaign. So because there was hypocrisy here, right? There's this hypocrisy here. You're going to go fight Nazism. We're going to fight valiantly, and then we're going to come home and not have any rights. And we don't want to make the same mistake that our soldiers, black soldiers, came home from World War I and found themselves in a red summer. So the civil rights is founded, its foundation is really in World War II. Although it was limited, for example, lynching is not executive crime yet. There's still civil rights abuses in the South. There's still disenfranchisement of the South. Its foundation starts during World War between 1940 and 1945, which is going to set us up for the 1960s. Again, it was limited. I just mentioned that, but nevertheless, it was there. And finally, technology and science. Look. Technological advancements during this time were incredible advances in science in terms of things like the bomb, the hydrogen bomb, the atomic bomb. If you've watched Oppenheimer, you know what I mean. What else here? For advances in science and technology, there's a Cold War arms race. So what happens here, there's things like the Manhattan Project, and there is government funding and government intervention in the economy so the government is pumping more money into the economy. It's pumping more money into science and research to combat the Soviets and to combat the communism. So the Cold War led to investments in technology and science, but the government allowing more people to go to school and paying for that because of things like the space race. Remember Sputnik? That was the first Soviet satellite that went to space. And of course, we're going to get to the moon in 1969, if you actually believe that. Just kidding. All right, that's Unit 7. That's the wrap-up of Unit 7. This is where we ended last time in class. It was quick. It was brief. Now it's your job to support all of this with vocab words. But the thing you saw today in this video is you saw changes over time and you saw developments. That is what they're looking for in APUSH. Next video will be on Unit 8.